What? Okay. Can you hear me? Hello?
Hey,
Yep,
how's it
I can
going?
hear you.
Hey.
Good to hear from you.
Wow, what's up?
How have you been? Look, I just want to tell you up front, man. I think it's a really shitty situation that you're in. As I understand it, you're like lost the partnership program in YouTube and you got kicked off Twitch, and I think that's really shitty. And I just want to tell you, directly that I'm really sorry about that. And I hope that you can figure out a way to find another place to corral your audience, man, because I think that that's really, really unfair.
Wow, thanks.
So,
I, I,
where are you
I think
planning to move now?
Well, I mean, I'm still on Twitch. I just don't have partnership anymore.
Oh, okay. So they can't sub anymore, and every donation has to go through,
Oh,
Hey,
process. It
Bill.
has
Oh
to
yeah,
have
wait, real
that.
quick. I'm not sure if we were clear. I'm streaming, just so you know.
No,
yeah, yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
Okay.
We're streaming this too.
Okay, yeah,
So
gotcha. All right,
Yeah,
just
I
making
should have
sure.
maybe noted that, but
Nope. Yeah, no problem. Okay.
yeah, because I mean, I think it was like just fucking shitty. Wait, just to confirm, are you still on YouTube? Just you're not being monetized there?
My YouTube is fine. My Twitch is just not monetized anymore.
Oh, okay, okay. But you have like pretty strong views on YouTube. Doesn't the ad revenue come in pretty good on that platform?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good. That's good to hear. Because look, I mean, irrespective of whether we agree or not on politics, right? We're all essentially in the same business, as it were. And we're all colleagues in that regard, and I think it's really shitty when arbitrarily they fuck with somebody's money. I think it's fucking wrong. I'm just totally against it, because today it's you, tomorrow it's me, and it's not fair at all.
Yeah, well,
yeah, and these were pretty innocuous comments to begin with. So yeah,
I mean, they were pretty
who knows?
inflammatory, but I don't.
What
I
were they
mean, compared to what
specifically?
they normally say on Twitch and get away with,
No, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but what were they specifically that got you in trouble with Twitch?
Well, they've actually never told me, but my guess is that when I said that, I think that like white militia people, if they want to defend their property against rioters, I think they have the ability to do so, even lethally or whatever. I said it like that, except a little bit more inflammatory.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sentiment that I would agree with, because I mean, shit. What exactly is the point of self-defense if you can't defend your own property from rioters, for crying out loud? You know. So I don't understand that. So anyway, I have curiosity. You don't have to answer this, but have you been thinking about plans as to how to turn this around, or what direction you're going to take after this?
Well, I mean, I can do a stream to YouTube now, so it's something I haven't done before.
Do you think you wouldn't run into the same problems on YouTube that you did on Twitch?
Not quite, but I mean, I'll have to be a little bit more careful.
I
And
have
so
a feeling
why
that
weren't you
YouTube is a
why
bit more lenient, but
then why weren't you streaming on YouTube before?
Because when you're a Twitch partner, you've got an exclusivity contract. You can't stream to competing platforms.
Oh, I had no idea about that. Oh, okay.
that's why they were just uploaded there afterwards. I see.
Oh, and I take it that Twitch is more lucrative than YouTube.
I guess that's what I'm going to find out.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough.
I think they take what, like 30% of all super chats.
Yeah, they take 30% of all super chats and 30% of the ad revenue that they tell you that they're getting.
Yeah.
Which I've always thought that was kind of dodgy, you know. Um, but well, yeah, I'm really curious to see how you're gonna turn this around. I mean, it's something of interest. And what about moving beyond the YouTube platform? Because we were talking just now with Zach about you. I was thinking, just spitballing here, that it might be worth your while to set up your own website and like do some sort of private streaming there, and you'd have you'd have a place that would be more stable long term.
Yeah, I did that like 7 years ago. I
Oh,
already have a
and
website where, yeah, I have like my own subscribers and everything on my own site. I've got my own chat and everything out there. I usually just embed the stream from other places onto my site. So yeah, I'm like a little bit better equipped than most to survive something like this. So
yeah. Well, okay, well that's good to know, because some of the people that this has happened to have just completely devastated them, and
Oh yeah.
yeah,
sometimes, yeah.
yeah. Now I gotta ask. I think a lot of people are curious. Do you blame Vaush for this situation? Do you think that him or his followers brought your comments to the attention of Twitch and fucked you over that way?
Yeah, probably. It's kind of hard to say, like, do you blame somebody? Usually situations like this are never as clear cut as, like, one party is at fault. Like,
Sure.
technically, I could have said things differently. His community could have not brigaded me. He could have not signal boosted some tweets. Twitch could have not banned me. There's technically, like, 15 different things that could have gone a different way, so.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, yeah, I think obviously his community had a big hand in it.
Yeah, because you were saying that he tweeted out. I didn't know that specifically. Did he tweet something out that was sort of like nudge and wink, encouraging his audience to brigade you?
Well, no, his girlfriend in his community told their audience to get me reported and banned, and then his roommate tweeted out a huge clip that had like 500,000 views on it, saying that I was like hated black people or something, and yeah.
Jesus.
Oh God! For the record, do you hate black people?
I love black people.
Shut the fuck up, all right? It's a stupid fucking meme.
Okay, can we clip that? Mm? Yeah, but do it with like a
yeah.
better porno voice, please.
Yeah, no, it's kind of insane. And then afterwards, Vaush comes into like a Twitter DM or a Twitter conversation you're having, just posting some Bugs Bunny meme, going, "Oh, ain't I a stinker?" Like basically avowing the entire thing and claiming responsibility, but doing it low key in a meme way, which is just pathetic. But,
Oh, I didn't even see that.
no, well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just him gloating about it, but it's
Because I'm
very
putting
difficult to
100%.
imagine that he had no idea this was going on.
I don't think that he personally wanted it to happen. But maybe that's just me being really charitable, but I don't think so. I think just his community really fucking hates me.
I could try to look up that tweet line where he was gloating about it, but that definitely gave me the impression that he was very much on board with all of this.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't think so. But
Yeah, I don't know. You're kind of just done with him entirely at this point, I imagine.
yeah, I've been trying to get off talking to lefties for a fucking year and a half now, but I keep getting sucked back into the commie debates.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. We're talking about this earlier, but you basically have like, I don't know, you were sort of like a liberal from maybe 20 years ago or something, when things were a bit more focused on free speech and not all the other shit that's going on right now. So you're more...
Maybe, yeah. I don't know if I'd say that. Free speech isn't like a huge thing I talk about. I don't really care that much. It's usually more like social and economic policy. Social and economic policy.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely like drifted to the center or over to the right, or I don't know what you call your positions right now. Would you still call yourself the left winger? Or?
In like contemporary, like American or international politics, I would pretty sure I'd be considered very hard left. In terms of internet politics, I have no fucking idea because this place is insane.
I think that in like the real world, you might be considered hard left, but in the internet world, you're just a Nazi.
But, yeah, something unironically, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, the right of self-defense has been very heavily abrogated by at least the internet left.
Well, it depends on who's self-defending, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I heard your comments on Kyle Rittenhouse, and I thought that was what would have gotten you into trouble.
Well, that was the context of that conversation, is where I said something maybe a little bit too inflammatory, yeah. So, and that whole thing is what people started to hate me over hardcore.
Yeah, because I completely agree. You know, Rittenhouse, incredible shot. We were talking about it just before. I mean, that little fucker, man, 17 years old, but he has a discipline of like a hardened Marine, man. I mean, it's amazing that he didn't hurt anybody innocent, you know, and he nailed the people who were actually attacking him. That's remarkable. That's admirable, to tell you the truth. And when I heard what you said, I was like, on the one hand, agreeing with it. On the other hand, I was really surprised by your vehemence. I mean, you obviously really admire the kid.
No, I think the kid was a fucking idiot. I thought he handled his rival really well, but I mean, personally, I would never go to another city and fight for somebody else's property. Fuck that shit. I don't think it's worth dying over. But I'm a very big like self-defense person. Like, I don't know. I think self-defense is like one of the like a fundamental American right? Like private property and defense of self should be like a pretty fundamental American belief.
Well, no, I don't even think it's like a right per se. It's just, come on, man. What, you're supposed to just roll over and let somebody kill you? What the hell's that all about? Yeah. And I have no understanding at all about the Lancaster riots over this policewoman who shot the guy wielding a knife. He was clearly off his rocker, and he was coming to kill her, No problem with that at all. But, they're using it for political reasons, so whatever. But, yeah, and I agree with you on Rittenhouse that him going there, it wasn't really like he bought any weapons, because the weapons were there in Wisconsin. And I do believe that him crossing the state lines is a trivial thing, because it was like a 10-minute drive, so it doesn't count, really. But him going there, I think that it was a little bit foolish. How he handled himself was incredibly, effective and just admirable. But I agree with you that he shouldn't have gotten involved in that situation to begin with. I mean, if they want to burn their city down, let them. That's my thinking.
Sure. Or I mean, I would never die for like a gas station, but that's
Not would I. Certainly not.
Not.
My thinking is that as we get closer to the election, it's becoming increasingly clear that Biden is toast. I mean, it's obvious that the man his head is not right, and it's really going to be some sort of Harris administration. And so I think that people are going to realize that, like it or not, Trump will win, and precisely because of that the violence and the insanity is going to increase almost exponentially between now and November. Would you agree with that statement?
I don't think any of the
Stuffing
polling
your
right
fat
now
fucking mouth.
points to Trump having a chance of winning, but I mean, things can change between now and November. In terms of will the violence continue, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Don't they give, like, what was it, 75% chance for Biden to win it? Or?
I think
Yeah,
that's
like
the
95% for Hillary. Yeah.
The projection for Biden is ahead now in the polls compared to where Hillary was last season.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was like 65-35 for Biden to win, for Hillary to win over Trump. I mean, 35% is impossible. Trump could still win. But to say that Trump is clearly ahead, I don't think is the case. The riots and everything are fun to talk about on YouTube and everything, but I think that the Americans are primarily concerned with economic issues right now and stuff related to the coronavirus. And it's hard to imagine that Trump is going to turn around American sentiment on how he's handled the virus before the election.
Well, my thinking is that the polls are not accurate, and for two reasons. I think that they're not reaching out to the people who would actually vote for Trump, who are a substantial segment of the population, on the one hand, and the other, I think that there is a substantial number of people who are lying to pollsters, because I think that people in the United States right now are too afraid to speak their minds. They realize that the political consequences of speaking their minds are such that it's just not worth it. And so if a pollster calls them, they're willing to lie to sort of like just get out of it.
I mean, I think in general, I think polls are pretty accurate. I mean, it's their job to be accurate, right? Like, it's,
yeah, they weren't accurate the last time. Now were they?
They were incredibly accurate last time. Hillary won the popular vote by 3 million votes. The polls were accurate, but the projections were pretty off. So the projections are where a lot of are much more statistically abstract, where people are taking all these numbers and trying to guess what's going to turn out and blah blah blah. The polls themselves were like pretty well, most within margin of error. There was one major polling fiasco last election season, and I think it was in the Democratic primary with Bernie versus Hillary. That was one of the biggest like polling fiascos. But the overall election polling was pretty close. Some of the projections were pretty off, but the shy voters thing, I mean, Nate Silver's talked about that before. I mean, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I've heard a lot of people talk about how shy voters and polls are missing it, blah, blah, blah. They did it during the Democratic primary. But for the most part, like, all of the polls were pretty dead on. Bernie got completely crushed. Biden won where he was supposed to. There wasn't another huge upset in Michigan. Pollsters seem like they got a better handle on how to evaluate that population. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's hard to say that, like, are the polls lying until we actually see the election results start to roll in, but...
Yeah, and what do you think of this, the whole notion of the so-called red mirage, that Trump will win and then there'll be all these mail-in votes that will just magically turn it all around for Biden?
The level of coordination that would be required to sabotage an election in that manner would be so absolutely unbelievable that if that was true, then we would have expected those powers to have either assassinated Trump or already rigged an office to get a Democrat elected. It doesn't make sense that there is so much deep state power that they could swing an election by millions of votes across several key areas in that way, but they still lost the election to Trump. Trump could have been overturned with like 60,000 well-placed votes in different swing districts. Like, I don't buy that at all. I mean, we can see it happening, but I mean, I think it could legitimately happen where a lot of mail-in votes just aren't counted in time, and you see Democratic voters are more likely to mail-in vote than Republican ones. But election fraud on that scale would require an unfathomable amount of coordination.
Well, let me ask you the following. You do know that in the United States there are 1,200 wildfires going on right now,
Sure.
and 70 in Canada.
Okay.
Okay. Now, it's pretty obvious that the wildfires are arson. We are seeing anecdotally, so many cases are popping up, multiples every hour.
Wait, how do we
It's
know? How
coming-
do we know it's clearly arson?
Well, there's like videotape of guys, with trying to set stuff on fire. There are people who have been caught.
There's been
by-
some people caught for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, this is a matter of how much of these things, because there's a shitload of wildfires going about now. How much of this is arson? But there's at least some arson, definitely.
I
Okay.
mean,
And-
like, given the scale of this is wildly conspiratorial. I mean, we've had bad wildfires before. The idea that there's some grand plan to start wildfires to undermine Trump's administration, I don't know if I'm on board
I'm
with
not
that
even sure how it actually undermines Trump's administration.
Well, no, it's just more chaos. I think that the
I guess.
ultimate goal of these organizations is to create chaos. They, as much chaos as possible, because the Democratic establishment says that the worse people feel, the more likely they will vote for the opposition in the next election.
Are you
That's the predominant mantra of the big brains of the Democratic Party.
Are you really sure that this is like a coordinated effort, or maybe just a couple of insane people going out, like even if they're Antifa or whatever the fuck? I mean, there's enough nutcases there who might just, take the power into their own hands and conclude, yeah, by burning down a couple forests, we're gonna get Biden in office, or whatever the fuck their plans are.
I mean, I don't think that there's like some big brain, some Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, stage managing the whole thing. No, but there are like a lot of competing interests who have a desire to see Trump out by any means necessary. And they've gone through different iterations of trying to get rid of him so hard, and that this is the current one. The current one being that, and this is historically accurate, when people feel miserable, they vote for the opposition. This is a truism in democracies. And so it seems to me that that's what they're aiming for. And I want to know what you think that, you say that you don't think that it's possible for widespread coordination of ballot box stuffing via mail-in votes. Why do you think that that's not possible when there's so much coordination obviously going on and so much of the rioting going on?
So I
And the
haven't.
looting
I don't
and
think
the arson.
I don't think there's been any evidence. First of all, the rioting being massively coordinated, I don't think there's any evidence for that. Arsons for forest fires, I don't think there's any evidence for that. There've been.
There is. That I gotta tell you that right now. There is.
If it was, that would be like national leading headlines. I think a lot of journalists would be really eager to break that story.
CNN didn't carry the UAE-Israeli deal. They didn't even carry that. Okay, so don't tell me about the mainstream news. It would have been putting up headlines about some particular issue or other, if it benefited Trump or hurt Biden. That come on.
So CNN does have multiple stories about the UAE-Israeli deal. But that's besides the point. I'm just saying that, like, typically when we start getting, like, today, in today's day and age, you have so many people leaking stuff. You have so many videos of everything. You have so much like stuff leaking from so many different like organizations all over the world, including the U.S. government and U.S. intelligence. The idea that there is some coordinated effort to set forests on fire to undermine Trump's presidency is fantastical. That nothing has leaked from that. That would require such an ungodly level of coordination, and I don't know how we haven't seen any evidence of it at all.
Well, we're seeing people who have been caught, arrested with incendiary devices, who were in the process of trying to start forest fires, or who indeed did cause forest fires and were caught after the fact. So that's a truism. Now,
Okay, wait.
the
So,
the
like,
steps.
I would need to look at that up because I just haven't heard that at all. I
Well,
just
you'd have to look it up. I can't give you a link because I'm sort of like stuck in a cast. I can't fucking
no,
move
yeah, I
and get to a
understand.
computer.
I'm not trying to like search. I just haven't like So here I've got
Well, look it
like
up.
sure, okay. So September 11th, FBI releases statement on misinformation related to wildfires. FBI, Portland, and local law enforcement agencies have been receiving reports that extremists are responsible for setting wildfires in Oregon. With our state and local partners, the FBI has investigated several such reports and found them to be untrue. Conspiracy
Yeah,
theories and
okay.
misinformation take
That's
valuable
September
research.
11th, right? September 11th.
So that was 6 days. So do you think it's massively changed in the past 6 days?
It is changing. It's an ongoing story, and
How
it's
many of
developing.
those 1,200 wildfires were burning 6 days ago?
The point, there are 1,200 forest fires in the U.S. and only 7 in Canada.
Wait, when you say that, are you trying to say that that's proof that they're being started? Is it possible that the
No,
climate in
it
Canada
looks
is a bit?
really fucking weird.
Is it possible that Canada reports wildfires differently? Is it possible that the
I don't
conditions?
think so.
Wait, hold on, because you're laughing very confidently. You don't think it's possible that perhaps in the U.S., so this is just a hypothetical, because I'm willing to bet neither of us actually knows. Do you think in the U.S. that if a forest fire starts in one area and branches off into 2 or 3 different ones, it's possible that maybe in the U.S. that's reported as 4, but maybe in Canada that's reported as 1? Like, I'm only bringing this up because a lot of countries across the world, for instance, report shootings in different ways or murders in different ways. Like,
I understand. I understand your point. It's a valid point. Okay, but no, that doesn't seem to be the case. I saw this this map somewhere, and I'm so sorry I can't give it to you right
no,
now
I
because
understand. I don't expect you to.
I broke my ankle and I'm actually far from my computer at this time, and getting to
Yeah,
it is
that's fine.
semi-impossible. Getting to the toilet is semi-impossible in my state. But no, look, I'm not trying to like have a big argument about it, but it seems that there is a lot more coordination going on than there seems to be a great deal of coordination among different factions that are extremely antagonistic towards Trump, who seem hell-bent on making sure that he does not get a second term by any means necessary.
Why wouldn't they
that's
just
the only.
focus on like the easier ways to do that then? Like focusing on like
Well, they already tried and failed now, didn't they?
Well,
I mean,
not
they
really.
did
I think
impeach
the
guy.
coronavirus stuff has been massively unpopular for Trump's administration. Why not just focus on that? And then the inability to pass like stimulus for the American public. These are 2 massively painful points.
Yeah, but the stimulus thing, people are blaming the Democrats for that one. And Nancy Pelosi's intransigence on the one hand. And on the other hand, a lot of people are more concerned about the collapse of law and order than the COVID-19 lockdown. I personally think that the COVID-19 lockdown is more serious than
I think
the
overwhelmingly, I think Americans are more concerned about economic issues than anything related to law and order. It might be in particular cities that are affected. Maybe people are a little bit more worried about law and order, but I think that right now the widespread American sentiment is worry about the economy for sure.
Okay, fine. But you have to grant me the fact, the point that there are a whole host of different groups in the United States that look kindly on creating more chaos because of the belief that they think that more chaos will bring about the end of the Trump presidency.
Okay, well, what do we do with that information, I guess, if we think that's true?
Then we have to look at the sources of chaos and wonder if they are legitimately organic or if they are being astroturfed.
And and I'm guessing you're falling on the AstroTurf side?
Well, on a lot of the issues, it seems a little too convenient.
So I'm not trying to put words in your mouth,
Yeah.
but is the idea that a Soros-like figure, somebody is like funding or instigating a ton of like unrest in disingenuous ways in order to give the appearance that the U.S. is less stable than it actually is to turn people away from Trump? Or
I don't think it's one person. I think it's a whole bunch of people. Because, yeah, they hate him so much that I think that they're willing to, destroy the village in order to save it. Yeah, absolutely. And no, not one like Soros figure. No, like Hollywood people who have free cash and they're willing to throw it at BLM, Antifa crazies who do God knows what, thinking that they're actually helping black people when, of course, they're not. When you burn black businesses, of course, you're hurting the black community. You're not helping them by any stretch of the imagination. You would agree with that, right?
that BLM doesn't want to get Trump reelected, or what? Can you repeat that last thing again?
that when BLM Antifa burned down black businesses,
Oh, that
that
it doesn't.
certainly hurts the black community. It
I
certainly
think
doesn't help them.
rioting actually hurts everything. But one of the big
Yeah.
reasons why I'm opposed to rioting is because it actually hurts, I think, democratic causes if you're left leaning.
Yeah, yeah, it hurts very badly.
But that seems
And,
like
well,
it would run counterintuitive then to the idea that left leaning people would be funding it if it hurts their causes electorally.
Well, lots of times people do things not because because they think that it will be good, even when the evidence is flying in the face of that.
Can I ask you a question? I'm just curious.
Sure.
For in relation to stuff like this, the idea that there might be like some coordination, what type of evidence would you need to see to convince you that that's not the case? Or like what could you read and you'd be like, okay, well this probably isn't happening.
Well, obviously you can't prove a negative. Okay. And look, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Okay. I mean, I believe that Paul McCartney is alive and Neil Armstrong was stepped on the moon and Elvis is dead. Okay. And 9/11 was just a bunch of Arab crazies. Okay. I don't believe in any of these, 9/11 truth or shit or any of that crap. But all of this chaos happening, you could argue that some of the demonstrations and protests were like an inevitable reaction to the lockdown. But a lot of it seems inorganic.
Okay, sure. I'm just curious if there was like, because for me, so one of the things that I always get worried about, especially doing online politics, is I don't ever want to wake up in 5 years and be like, oh my God, I totally missed this. I was brainwashed. I deluded myself. That's one of my biggest fears. So one of the questions I tend to ask myself over a given issue is like, well, what would it take me to convince me that I'm wrong about this? Because I feel like if I didn't have an answer to that question,
That's really admirable.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just curious in regards to this. I'm curious if there's like, well, if I saw a story about this, or if I saw a video about this, maybe I'd be like, okay, sure, these are organic things that are popping up. It's not just like funded by or astroturfed by some person.
No, I don't believe. Again, I have never believed in one wizard behind the curtain. It's just a lot of little wizards, and a lot of them all running around, throwing money at causes and pursuing their own agenda. I think, for instance, like Soros, to give just one specific example, like he looks like fucking Emperor Palpatine. Okay, so yeah, lots of people are going to light on him like flies on shit, and say, he's the one, pulling the strings behind it all. But yeah, like look at what's her name, Mackenzie Bezos, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, who walked away with $50 billion from her divorce. And she admitted the other day that she's been throwing God knows how much fucking money at different liberal causes. You don't think that has had an effect?
Well,
and
but
all the other
liberal, isn't that like a big thing that like Republicans would want? Don't I thought the whole point of things like Citizens United is we want companies and people to be able to throw as much money as we want at politics via things like super.
I don't know about the Republican Party. I personally think that that's horrible. I think that the Citizens United is one of the worst decisions ever, and it should be rescinded or not rescinded.
Overruled.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I forget the exact term, but not rescinded. It's not a law. But no, I think that corporations should not have the right to spend unlimited funds for any political campaign. On the contrary, I think that it should be limited. And I personally, if I had my druthers, I'd eliminate the whole lobbying system because it's perverse. It creates perverse incentives. And I'd make it a point that no government employee could ever work for a lobbying firm for, say, 10 years or something like that. Because you create malincentives whereby people in government, when they rise high enough, will not be overseeing the regulatory framework. And on the contrary, will start acting to the benefit of the industry that they hope to join as soon as they retire from their government position. You see what I'm saying? And so that's why I'm, extremely opposed to Citizens United and extremely opposed to any kind of lobbying. Yeah.
Okay.
But no, but I'm really intrigued by your stance on like trying to disprove or trying to keep an open mind, enough of an open mind to realize, that what would I need to convince me that this is the wrong idea? I'm not phrasing what you said very elegantly, but I think you get the gist of it.
Yeah.
insofar as this is concerned, it's not so much that I believe it. It's sort of like I'm keeping an open mind about it. At this time, there isn't enough proof to say definitively this is going on. But at this time, there is enough proof, if only anecdotally in some cases, to say it looks funky. It doesn't look on the up and up.
You don't think it's legitimate that there might legitimately be just a lot of civil unrest over everything going on?
Not the way it's emerging. It just seems inorganic. Like I said, look, when John Kennedy was shot in Dallas, Richard Nixon had arrived in Dallas that very morning on a commercial flight. That's just a weird fucking coincidence. And I have no doubt that whether you believe that Oswald shot him or that there was a whole cabal to shoot him, I have no doubt whatsoever in either case that nobody thinks that Richard Nixon seriously thinks that Richard Nixon had anything to do with that assassination. It was just a weird, confluence of events whereby he showed up in Dallas on that very morning. Just weird, a weird coincidence. So I'm open to weird coincidences, but when they're just like too many, it just seems strange. It just doesn't smell right. Okay. And I'm not pointing the finger and being definitive about it because there isn't enough proof, but there's enough evidence to say this isn't a random coincidence. This isn't, just, and so when I hear people going off the deep end of the conspiracy theories and blaming it all on Soros, I say, no, you got to hold your horses. There's enough to sort of like point in the direction that it's inorganic. Beyond that, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But, look, everything eventually comes out. In 10 years, if they say that, oh, these people were involved and they were coordinating and they would have like some little chat group or whatever the fuck in order to coordinate shit. And, some historian comes up with all the material and all the primary sources and says it was like this and like this and like that, and they were in cahoots, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Gotcha. The only thing that worries me about those types of thoughts is I don't feel like it's a very human-like quality to operate in terms of like probabilities. Like I feel like people either think something is or it isn't. So like, let me give you an example. Let's say somebody accuses somebody of being like a child molester, right? I don't think anybody would like be in a room with that person and think, okay, well, there's like a 10% chance that this guy is like a child molester. It would either be like he is or he isn't. So when it comes to like certain conspiracy things, it seems hard for me to imagine that a lot of people be like, well, there's no proof that these are coordinated, but maybe. It seems more like people would either have it in their head that these are coordinated massively on a huge level, or they aren't. It seems like really hard for people to hold like a probability in their mind, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see your point entirely. And in my own case, I would say it's a probability. A certainty, no. A zero certainty, no. There is a chance. I mean, the guy sitting there in the room with the bald guy with the glasses and the mustache, maybe he is a pedophile. Maybe he's not. Well, let's put the odds at 20%. I mean, frankly, most of my life I lived it that way in terms of probabilities because nothing is certain. I mean, there's absolutely nothing that is 100% certain or 0% certain. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
So, I mean, that's been my own personal experience. But at the same time, in terms of like looking at events in history, and in my own case of living through things that I've seen and people were certain that this was going to happen, this is for sure going to happen, and then it didn't happen, all right? And some other event being totally impossible, and of course it did happen, Looking at the world probabilistically, looking at events probabilistically, seems to me the most obvious way to approach the world, to approach any kind of prediction. You can't say for certain of anything,
Okay.
What about you? Don't you look at the world probabilistically?
I would like to think I do, but I recognize that for a lot of people, that's a very, very, very challenging thing to do. Just because of how people are very all or nothing. or like, you know, all or nothing, good or evil, black and white. Like I think that's how humans tend to do things. For like, I guess if if we go a little bit of a evolutionary, if we borrow from Evo Psych, it seems like one thing that we do really well as humans is we recognize patterns very quickly. And you know, in the wilderness, when we're trying to survive and a bush shakes, we instantly assume it's dangerous. That's like beneficial for us. But nowadays, it seems like that makes it really hard for us to function in the world. Sometimes we jump to conclusions very quickly or see patterns where they don't actually exist. Is my worry, I guess.
I agree with that. And on the other hand, there is a whole series of industries that are based on the premise of shaking the branch, to use your metaphor, shaking the branch everywhere that we look to get us all riled up. The news media, for instance, its job, the way to get clicks, the way to get eyeballs on the screens, is to shake the branches of the bush even when there's nothing there. Yeah. And so I think that at this time, a lot of people are like hyper alert. And I would agree that with you that tends to make them go like all or nothing. It's definitely a conspiracy. It's definitely not a conspiracy, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
I think that these times are the most chaotic times in our lives, and I do believe that they're going to get a lot worse, to tell you the truth. Have you seen what's been going on in Australia, for crying out loud? Good God.
What specifically? What do you mean?
Oh, okay. I saw a video that I found shocking in this open air market in Melbourne. The Victoria Police basically swept it out, and it was just, you know, random people, and the random people, I mean, just ordinary people, you know, not militants of any side. I mean, they were there shopping for food, you know. It was, you know, one of those typical kind of like bourgeois bohemian kind of open air markets, you know, with like, you know, lemons and apples and all that crap, right? And they were just shopping there, and the police came, like a whole battalion of cops, to clear them out because, you know, lockdown. And they cleared them out, and the people were all screaming freedom, freedom, and the police just came and swept them away. And yeah, it's like Australia is becoming like it's really devolving into a police state. And I think that Australia and New Zealand are kind of like the forward edge of this authoritarianism, quasi-totalitarianism.
New Zealand, like
that's
one of the
sweeping.
most successful like Western style countries that in terms of like how they've dealt with the coronavirus, though. Like I think
Well,
New
it
Zealand was
depends
freaking
how
out
you measure
the other
how
day
you
because they
measure
had like
success.
success in that they've like curbed the virus. Like they don't have to worry about it now.
Well, they might not have to worry about the virus, but they have everybody imprisoned in their own homes, which I think is crazy, especially for a disease that's endemic. It's inevitable that it's going to become endemic. And wasn't that the whole point 6 months ago? You know, we're going to have lockdown to flatten the curve, to protect our health services. And now it's become this idiotic notion that, oh, we're going to have everybody locked down until we find a cure.
Well, not. I think
There
the
is
goal
no
is
cure.
the goal is to look for a vaccine, right? Is the
Or look for a vaccine. That's absurd. It's just stupid. Okay, especially considering the mortality rate. It's an impossible thing. And the vaccine, you know, if you want to try it out, be my guest. I want to be one of the last people to take it. I want to see all the other people who croak first, and then they're like, "Oh, you know, we did an oopsie." You know, come on, man. I mean, no, it's a disaster, and I think it's the opportunity for a lot of mediocre Democratic politicians to assume an inordinate amount of power by means of fear, you know, and people have so far been putting up with it, but I think that people are going to revolt in the not too distant future, to tell you the truth. If what that video showed about what was going on in Melbourne, and the fact that people were bitterly opposed to the police clearing them out.
Do you think that if we were to look at polling data from Australia and New Zealand, do you think the majority of those populations would rather be just sick in the open area? Are there even significant like lockdowns right now in New Zealand and Australia?
Well, as I understand it, New Zealand is like locked down, you know, stern to bow. As insofar as Australia is concerned, I think it's in each individual state, and I do believe that Victoria is the most quote unquote aggressive. But you know, the empirical data coming out of Sweden, which had the diametrically opposed approach, where they had no lockdown whatsoever, Well, they went over the hump, and they have among the lowest levels of COVID-19 infections in Europe.
They might now, but they
Where
also have one of the highest death rates. They rival the United States in terms of like fatality rates for population.
Well, have you thought to yourself that maybe that's the mortality rate, and that there is really not much that can be done about it, and that you
But
have to let
that's
it
not.
burn through the population?
Well, it doesn't seem like that was the case in New Zealand or South Korea or Vietnam or,
Yeah, but at what cost?
I mean, at the cost of a bit of economic harm.
A bit.
Well, I mean, that's kind of, we have to make that decision, right? Cars cost more money
and
because we have to waste money putting airbags and seatbelts in them, but that's like a trade-off
Yeah,
that we
yeah,
accept, right?
but there's another problem, is that so much of this lockdown has caused the death of people by depression, by postponing treatments for
Yeah, it can.
cancer
Listen,
and
I'm not
heart
going to
issues.
disagree with you that I think it's silly not to have a realistic conversation on what are the acceptable levels of COVID-19 deaths. It legitimately, to me, feels like some Democrats are thinking that like it needs to be at 0, which is unrealistic. I don't know if that number is 100 people dying a day or 50 people dying a day or 200 people dying a day. The number is somewhere there. It's obvious it's not 0, right? There is always going to be people dying and stuff like this. But the idea that it's like not that big of a deal, we can just let it burn through a population. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily the case either. I mean, like we've had, we're probably pushing 250, maybe 300,000 deaths in the U.S. right now, in terms of people.
I think it's like 218.
Well, the official reported numbers are around 200,000, but when you look at excess deaths due to pneumonia and stuff, it's clearly a bit above that. But even if we go by the official reported numbers of 200K, that's still like significantly worse than what we would expect on even the worst flu season. So it's probably not good to just like throw that many people into the fire for the sake of the economic machine that isn't even doing a good job for the average American at the moment. Like, there's probably some middle ground here where, sure, we acknowledge we're going to open up, some people are going to die, but like to just say, fuck it, we don't need to do anything. I don't know. That's a.
Well, you do know that the number of deaths proportional to the population are much less than previous flu epidemics in the United States. If I recall correctly, the one in like 1958, but I could be wrong about that.
Well, I know compared to like the Spanish flu, but I mean.
Yeah, the Spanish flu, for instance.
I don't
So
know
that
if
one
our
was
goal.
significantly higher.
Sure, but our litmus test probably shouldn't be, as long as it's not as bad as the worst pandemic ever, it's okay, right?
Well, how could I put this? Let's start with some basic premises that I think that you and I can both agree on. Number one.
Also, wait, I'm
impossible.
sorry. Real quick, just I have an obligation in like 10 minutes. So if we get into the middle of the topic and it sounds like I'm running away, I'm not trying to like dodge it. I'm just saying that I have to.
No. Then it's still fun. I mean, if you have to run off, then let's tie a bow to the conversation now.
Sure.
Look,
Yeah,
it's
go.
been delightful talking to you. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope that we can have it again. The point I wanted to make now, very briefly, was that I wanted to go through like the basic premises that you and I can both agree on. Like, for instance, that number one, there is no reasonable way to prevent a virus from spreading through a population. And so what you want to do is mitigate the effects of it, but you can't really stop it because in a practical sense, it's truly impossible to stop a virus once it gets into a population.
Sure,
Number
but this
one.
is also like, this is kind of a false dichotomy in that like, it doesn't have to be either stop it or let it burn. It could be like a controlled spread through things like social distancing, mask wearing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was in favor of that. You're talking about a controlled burn, which I agree with.
Yeah.
Don't let it burn to have like an incredible spike that will overwhelm a healthcare system and will cause needless deaths because there are not going to be enough medical personnel to take care of all the sick. I'm against that, but it's pretty obvious that we never got to that high water mark of overwhelming our healthcare system. It could have been in a couple of places in Spain and Italy,
Feels like
but
in New
in general
York
in the
that
West.
happened, and then for briefly in Texas, I know there were hospitals complaining about having to ship people off or whatever, or not being able to deal with, or having to make choices about who gets what. It's happened in a few places in the U.S. It didn't quite reach the like emergency meltdown levels, but there were definitely places in New York and Texas where this did happen.
Yeah, a key issue there, reached, past tense. When did that happen roughly?
Well, for Texas, it was fairly recently, maybe a month ago, I think, and then for New York, it was quite a while ago.
Yeah, it was back in April, May. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of controlling the burn, but you can't stop it. It's like a hurricane. You can prepare for it, but you're not going to stop it. You can't really stop nature. Nature sets its mind to something. You just got to stand still and take the hit and ameliorate the effects of it.
Yeah, to be getting a little pedantic though, we say that it's nature, but I mean the way that this thing spread is one of the reasons, for instance, like why we have to deal with this so much is because we have like an unprecedented level of like air travel today, right? Whereas like viruses would have gone through populations way differently in the past, like, well, because of technology,
Slower.
not necessarily. Yeah, because we like connect people all around the world and stuff. Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, but I mean, how can I put it? We have forgotten the point of the lockdowns and social distancing and masks and whatnot. I'm fortunate enough to be living in Holland here, and in Amsterdam specifically. And here they have lockdowns were a voluntary issue from the very beginning. You didn't have to be indoors. In fact, I went every day to work and no problem. Number one. Number two, the masks and the social distancing, for a while, they sort of like implemented them, but then they realized this isn't really helping. And so they just ignored it and they let it like drift away kind of thing. The only time that you have to wear masks at this point is in public transportation. But other than that, you don't really have to. And not even in stores, because here they looked at the evidence and they're like, well, it doesn't really seem to help. That's the issue. But I think that in the other Western democracies, they've lost sight of the practicality of these measures, and they're just implementing them for the sake of implementing them, for the sake of appearing to be "quote unquote" doing something.
Flamenco said, "Fucking Corona discussion. Why are you so boring?"
Yeah, I mean, I guess like, I don't disagree that we need to have a realistic talk about like why we're doing the things we're doing. Yeah, we might just come to different spots on that, but yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, best of luck to you. I really mean that.
What is this?
Wait.
Kind of TTS shit?
Yeah, I don't know why he's... Okay. Well, listen,
What
it's been fun
happened?
talking to you guys. Flamingo's like spamming the fucking N-word on TTS. Why is it even turned on in this server?
I don't know if... I didn't even know that was a thing, to be honest. But yeah, no, my apologies. I'll figure out a way to turn that off.
All right.
What happened? I missed it
God
entirely.
damn it.
Not everybody is born with a fucking silver spoon that can start 50 million fucking businesses. You don't think a lot of these small businesses are literally these people's livelihoods? What do you